All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our continuation of our stream of the parables this morning. We're going to continue in our daily doses as we are going through the parables of Jesus. I'm glad that some of you are joining me this morning. I know a lot of people watch this later, and you're just as important too. Thanks for watching this later whenever you're watching it. We are going to continue in the parables this morning. I don't have any major updates or anything other than what was announced on Sunday. Nothing major has happened since then. Oops, my phone is still on. Let's turn that off so that it doesn't interfere. Okay. We're going to do, like I say, we're going to do the parables this morning. I've turned my phone off. Sometimes I remember to do that and sometimes I don't. I don't know what it is. People just want to contact me around 9 o'clock. That's just when people start contacting me. So we are going to we've moved in through the parables that appear in all three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We've done all the ones that appear in all of them. So now we're switching over to the ones that appear in two or more of the gospels. We're just going to go through them sort of in order. It's going to be arbitrary. It's totally arbitrary. If you're looking at the list of parables that you can download from the website if you want, then it's just going to seem random because it is random. I'm just picking the ones I want to do. I don't know if we're going to do all the parables, or we're going to do the ones that I find to be interesting maybe, or do them until I get tired of doing them. So we're going to do the parable of the two builders this morning. This is an early parable, one of the earlier ones in the teaching of Jesus, found at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. This is it appears twice. We'll read both of the instances of the parable this morning. Let's switch over to my notes here. As I was saying before my phone interrupted me, I don't have any updates since Sunday, so be checking the bulletin. If there's any updates about anybody, we'll send that out as a call, so just be aware of that. Be praying for the people who are back at school this week, and of course carrying on. Be praying for the schools around the country that are opening, that things will go well and students and teachers will be healthy and safe. Let's be praying for them. Matthew 7 is where we're going to be this morning. Matthew 7, 24 through 27. Actually, we're going to read one in Luke as well. The parable of the two builders. Now, baby, better known by the song, right? The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came down, right? The wise and the foolish man who built their houses. That children's song. And I like children's songs. We've started doing Pew Packers on Sunday evenings, 5 or 10 minutes before. Well, it's not before. It starts at 5, and then we do 5 or 10 minutes where the kids go up front and they sing some songs, and Derek talks to them about their classes. And I like it because the children's songs, more than I think adult songs, are story-based, right? There's a lot of songs about stories. This is a classic example. The wise man built his house upon the rock. That song is the parable in song form. You know the parable because you've sung the song a billion times at VBS's and maybe at children's camps or wherever. You know, we know that song. That's what songs do, is they stick in our brain, right? They take the melody and they sort of worm into our head, and now we know the stuff, and that's good, right? So let's read this parable, Matthew 7, 24 through 27. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. It's an interesting phrasing at the end here. Great was the fall of it. Now, a couple of things about this parable. This is a fairly basic parable, right? Again, you see the narrative. The narrative form of the parable is you've got two dudes, and then a thing happens to those two dudes. They do a thing, and then a thing happens to them, and then there's a consequence, right? It's a very basic plot, but it does have a plot nonetheless. And we see the point. Now, this is a parable that in Matthew and Luke comes at the tail end of the Sermon on the Mount. So when we think about this context here, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, the context for that is the Sermon on the Mount. Whoever hears the words that he literally just said to them, right? He's spent a ton of time, let's go through it really briefly here. He spent a ton of time talking about a lot of different stuff in the Sermon on the Mount. So I have a list of things. Let's pull it up here. as we look at this list of the things that he's talked about. And again, remember, whoever hears these words of mine and does them, that's what he said. So let's look at these very briefly here, the words that he said. And to be clear, the parable has sort of two meanings here. There's the immediate meaning of, I just said some stuff in the Sermon on the Mount, hear these things and do them, and then this is what you'll be like. And then the more broad meaning, right, of generally the words of Jesus, not just on the Sermon on the Mount, but in general the words of Jesus, listening and doing. But specifically, this comes at the tail end of the Sermon on the Mount, so let's look at the context there. Everyone who hears these words, well, okay, we talked about the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes were what? What were the Beatitudes? Those are blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are the wherever. And the key, the overwhelming point of the Beatitudes is what? Blessed are those who really the world thinks shouldn't be blessed because they have some attitude that the world shouldn't have, right? It's happy or blessed are those who are in some way having an attitude that the world looks down on. Poor in spirit, meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And then, of course, the blessings that come from having those attitudes. The salt and light. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world, right? That phrase, those phrases, those messages. You are the ones who stand out if you are my people, right, is what he's saying there. And then he has this section here. It's hard to tell because I've centered it. Maybe I shouldn't have centered this text, but the smaller text underneath. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And then he's going to list some things. It's the next 4 bullet points here that are about this idea of having righteousness that exceeds the scribes and the Pharisees. Anger, lust, divorce, oaths, retaliation, enemies. This is the section of, you have heard that it was said. You have heard that it was said to those of old, the Old Testament, people in the old law, you should do this thing. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you, Jesus says, do something better. So, classic example would be anger. You have heard that it was said, you shall not murder, but I say to you that everyone who is angry at his brother without cause is a murderer, right? So the idea of moving beyond mere actions into the way we control our thoughts and the way we think about things. Giving, praying, fasting, that section in chapter 6, what is he talking about there? Don't do your righteousness to be seen by others. Don't give to be seen by others. Don't pray to be seen by others. Don't fast to be seen by others. Do those things in your private relationship with God. It's not about how people perceive you, right? It's about how God perceives you. And then judging, and then prayer, and then the golden rule, those things are the end. We're not going to go over all of these things, but I want to make a point here. You look at this list. You think about the parable at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, which comes after all this, right? You have heard not you have heard it. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like this man. Let's go back to that parable real quick. Wrong one. There we are. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a man who built his house on the rock, and the rain fell, etc., etc., etc. When he says this to them, he has a very particular meaning in mind here, right? Doing and thinking and living in a way that is different than the world. That's what these are all about. The things that he just got done talking to them. He just got done talking to them about the Beatitudes, having attitudes that the world looks down on, being different than the world, the salt and light, having righteousness that exceeds the scribes and the Pharisees. They're teaching you all these things, but they're not doing them. About not just controlling your actions, but controlling your thoughts and controlling your heart. When he thinks about the idea of judging, judge not lest you be judged, and with the measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. Very much self-examining and making sure we're doing what's right. Living in a way, thinking in a way that is better than the quote-unquote religious elite. And then he comes down to this parable. Whoever hears the words of mine and does them will be like a man who built his house on a rock. Making your life different in the way that Jesus wants it to be is the foundation of a solid life. Most of the people are fools, right? Because they don't do the words of Jesus. And so the point of the parable is what? things are going to happen. There's really an ultimate meaning. The ultimate meaning we know is the judgment, right? The end of time when God judges the world. That's the sort of the ultimate meaning of this parable, is he's going to look at, and the winds will blow and the wind of judgment will come, and those who built their life on the foundation of Jesus and his teaching, they're going to stand, they're going to be firm. Those who did not build their life on the teaching of Jesus, those people are going to fall in judgment. Like, that's the ultimate meaning. But there's, of course, meaning today too, I think, where we order our lives around these things. There's these things we build our lives on, the foundations of our lives. We've talked about this in our Sunday morning sermon series. The things that we care about the most, the things that we prioritize, the things that we try to order our life around, the things that we tend to do more, those things form the core of our life. And when bad things happen, when difficult times come, when things are disastrous, we fall back on those things that we've prioritized. And if those things that we prioritized are our health, or our possessions, or our families, or our hobbies, then when those things are destroyed, when those things go away, when terrible things happen to us, we're going to fall apart. Jesus offers in this list, I'll put the list back up here again, in this list of behaviors, Jesus offers something that is better, because these things are not based on temporary, physical, earthly things. These things are based on a mindset. They're based on an attitude, right? They're based on a faith that doesn't go away if bad things happen. It gets stronger when bad things happen, because we've already based our life on something different than the world. We've already based our life on something better than the world. So when bad times come, the storms of life blow, and terrible winds come, then we have that foundation that really hasn't changed. It's not like it's any different because I have something bad in my life. These things don't really rely upon having earthly success or happiness. They're more than that. Now, it's interesting as we read the other account of this. As we read the other account of this parable, Luke 6:46 through 49 is the other place where this parable comes up. Let me check the chat real quick, see if there's any questions. Nope. So as we read the other instance of this parable in Luke chapter 6, Jesus has Luke records it with a little bit of different flavor, a little bit of different sort of emphasis in Luke's account of this story. Luke 6:46 through 49. And note the way that Jesus says this. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. Then, and I want to reiterate this one more time, the life that is built on the principles of the Sermon on the Mount, and I'll put them back up there just so you can look at them one more time. The life that is built on these principles is a life that is well built, a life that is able to withstand, right? So we keep reading in Luke. Let's see here. Where was I? But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built a house in the ground without a foundation, and when the stream broke against it, immediately fell, and the ruin of that house was great. Same thing at the end there, but I want to note at the beginning, this first line, Jesus has this question: why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? And I've said this before. I often wonder about the intonation of Scripture, about how he phrases, like, how is he saying this? What sort of attitude does he have here? Why do you call me Lord, Lord? Like, what are you doing? That's so dumb. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I tell you to do? He's just got done giving this long sermon, and people have come to him, and this happens throughout his ministry, right? People come to him and they want healing, and they want the food, and they want the blessing, and they want the good things, and they come to Jesus, and then they don't do the things that he says. This is the ludicrousy of this, the insanity of it. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, as if I'm such in a high position of authority? I'm so great, I'm so awesome, you call me Lord, Lord, but then you don't do what I tell you. You don't do the things that I say. That's what Jesus is asking, and then he gives this parable. Because here's what happens in our lives, and not maybe in our lives, but in modern times. And it's happened throughout history. It's not just modern. People who come to Jesus and say, Lord, Lord, and they want the blessings and they want the benefit, but they don't actually do the things he said, they are the fool. Where they build their life into this, they build this structure of Jesus' promises and his blessings, and that's the thing they live in, and it's their house. But the foundation is the doing of the things that he said. And they don't have that foundation. It's the obedience. Faithful obedience is the thing that makes your life solid. So we elevate these things, we build our life on the principles and the promises rather, and the blessings of Jesus and the things that he said, that they sound really nice and they sound so good and they're so awesome, and so I sort of build my house on them, but I've left the foundation out. I'm not doing what he said, I'm not obeying, I'm not actually changing my life, and then the storm comes and it just blows it down. Because unless I've obeyed faithfully, the blessings and the promises are meaningless. It is through that obedience to the things that he has said that I build that foundation in my life. Because I do those things no matter what's going on in my life. And so when bad things happen, good things happen, it doesn't matter. I've built my life on a faithful obedience to Jesus, and I've changed the way that I live. And that's what gives me the solid foundation, the foundation that lasts no matter what happens. And ultimately, as we've said, the ultimate meaning of this parable, a foundation of faithful obedience that will give me confidence in the day of judgment. I don't have to worry about the storm that will come and knock down my house because it is built on that foundation. Whoever hears these words of mine and does them is the wise man who built his house upon the rock. Let's end in a prayer. God, I come before you and I ask you to give us humility and obedience to you. Help us to establish our lives and build them on the foundation of your principles and the things that you have told us. We're thankful for the teaching of Jesus, who shows us the way to live a better life, who gives us the stability and firmness of his promises. We ask you, please help us to seek those things. I ask you, please be with those who are struggling with health, as Bev is recovering, and Ralph as well, as he's continuing to recover. And we ask you, please be with those who are going to start chemo treatments and those who are going to start various things soon. I ask you, please give them healing and strength and comfort. I ask especially that you be with the world at this time as we're still dealing with COVID, and be especially with schools that are opening and students that are going back and teachers that are having to make hard decisions and administrations. Please bless them and give them wisdom and insight. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your church. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, guys, that's our study for this morning. A little bit of a shorter study, and that's okay. Like I said, I don't think I have any particular updates. Be checking the bulletin and the calendar, and if there's any updates, we'll send them out to you. Thanks for being with me, Karen and Roxanne. Those are the only people I know for sure are watching. I know there's 7 others of you, but I don't know who you are. So thanks for being with us this morning as we will continue our study of the parables on Friday. We will continue at the building. We will be back at the building this Wednesday. We just had weird power outages. That's why we didn't meet last Wednesday, but back at the building this Wednesday for Bible classes. So have a good rest of your Tuesday, and hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow. Wednesday's tomorrow. Man, the whole week runs together. Hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow night for Wednesday study.